Welcome to the Westside Investors Network, WIN, your community of investing knowledge for growth. This is the Real Estate Professionals Investing Podcast for real estate professionals by real estate professionals. This show is focused on the next step in your career, investing. Thank you for listening. And please, if you like our content, rate us on your podcast provider. Just a quick disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are for educational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell any shares or securities, make or consider any investments, or take any other action.
Welcome back to another episode of the Deal Deep Dive segment on the Westside Investors Network podcast. I'm your host, Trent Werner. In this segment, our featured guests will share their unique stories on a specific deal they've invested in. We will dive deep into finding the deal, financing the deal, writing an offer, and the due diligence. Do us a solid and smash that subscribe button, leave us a rating, and share this episode. And now, let's dive deep. Welcome back to the Westside Investors Network podcast. I am your host, Trent Werner. On today's Deal Deep Dive episode, we are joined by Jake Burhans. Jake has a real estate wholesale company and investment company based out of the Northeast of the United States. Today, Jake and I are going to talk about a 12-unit wholesale deal that he was able to complete, as well as a single-family deal that he was able to work on when he was on vacation. We're also going to go over the intricacies of certain wholesale situations and talk about Jake's career and experience to this point. Now let's welcome Jake Burhans. All right, Jake Burhans, like cold hands, Burhans, is joining us today on the Westside Investors Network podcast. Jake and I are going to talk a little bit about his career. We do have a specific deal in mind that we're going to get into in a little bit. Before we do that, Jake, I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience and maybe someone that hasn't heard from you yet. Jake, how did you get into real estate and what are you currently doing within the real estate industry?
Loaded question. I love it to get going here. I appreciate you having me on. Always excited to come on and talk about real estate, mindset, entrepreneurship, all those things. I am a real estate entrepreneur, I like to say. We do a little bit of investing, but when you get into wholesaling, it's really just a sales and marketing business, which is really just a business at its core. But I met my now business partner in college, freshman year across the dorm hall, and we started with Rich Dad Poor Dad, like junior year of college. Read that. I was going to get an accounting job, decided not to do it. Went full on real estate my senior year. Had to work a bar backing job for like 8 months after I graduated until we went full time about 15 months ago. And since then, we've just really been focused on we can get into it in more detail, but our wholesaling business, right? One of the biggest things, and I think a lot of people run into this at the beginning of their careers, are chasing too many rabbits, right? Trying to build too many bridges at once. So we were realtors, we were trying to wholesale, and we were trying to buy and hold multifamily. We were like, yeah, we could do this. Like we're gonna crush it. Couldn't do it, right? You're just spinning your tires. If you did it over a long enough time horizon, you could be successful in all three things. But you're just at the beginning, you're just spinning your tires. But if you could focus all your efforts on one avenue, whether you want to be a realtor or a mortgage broker or an investor or a podcast host, whatever it is, you're going to get so much more traction. So about 15 months ago, we said, hey, let's put everything else on pause, focus on wholesale. And then we really started to catch some traction over the last year here.
So what was the order or the timeline? Realtor, wholesaler, and investor. How did those three line up?
Yeah, so first it was investor, multifamily investing, because we read Rich Dad Poor Dad, we're like passive income, all these things, right? So we were bird dogging for investors, which is essentially, if we would have known how to wholesale, we would have made way more money. But we would find like a multifamily property, right? Say it was like a 5-unit and it was $500,000. They'd give us 1% of that, like $5,000, right? Which when you're in college is still a lot of money, but we would just be making 1% finder's fees for these multifamilies. So we started doing that, but then we just came across wholesaling through a podcast, Wholesale Hotline. If people know Pace Morby, he's a big creative finance guy. Brent Daniels or Jamil Damji, they have a Wholesale Hotline podcast. You're like, wow, man, we saw the big checks. You're like, well, you can make 70 grand, like you can make 80 grand in one deal. Like that's crazy. Obviously you just see the good parts of it. You don't see the tough parts of it. So we kind of went into that hole, but we saw that as an avenue to replace our income. So it was multifamily, then it's like, okay, let's do wholesale, but we're still doing multi on the side, right? And then we had some relationships with some realtors in the area. And it was really a level 10 realtor opportunity if we wanted to do that. But it just ended up being too much, obviously. So then after a little bit, we said, let's get rid of the realtor first. Then we were just multifamily and wholesaling. Then we're like, hey, let's just do wholesaling for now. Because there's an interesting mindset of okay, I want to get wealthy. I'm going to go buy rentals, right? But here's the thing. It's going to take you forever to get wealthy if you're just saving up a little bit of money, investing in a property, right? You want to get rich first and then get wealthy, right? It's going to be so much quicker. So if you can go build a business that's going to generate you a ton of cash flow, inherently, you're just going to have to go buy real estate because you're going to have so much to pay in taxes, right? So our thought process is, hey, let's build this wholesale business, automate it. It's going to be an asset just like a multifamily building would be. And then we're going to take all that cash flow, then go invest it in multifamily, right? So that's kind of our thought process behind it.
I love that. I mean, I've talked with plenty of contractors that do flipping, and they have a similar process. I mean, it's the same kind of timeline, right? Where they have all these flips going on. They have all these, income, I guess, checks that they get, wages that they're going to have to pay taxes on. And then they end up holding like the every fourth one or every fifth one, and then inherently become an investor that has a portfolio because you end up just holding them, or in your situation, you just go buy them and hold them after, a set amount of income that you guys have generated.
Exactly. And another thing to note too is when you own multifamily, especially like smaller units, 4, 5, 6 units, you're not just taking that cash flow. Like that's just not the reality of it, right? You got to keep that for repairs, right? And all those things. So for one, if you're running the building the right way, you're not going to touch the cash flow for probably 1 or 2 years anyways, right? Because you want to build up a little bit of a war chest. But then on top of that, you really just want to keep the cash flow in there, because when things go wrong, you don't want it to be drawing out of your pocket to maintain the building. So ideally, you just don't live off the cash flow and you just have a business that gives you income, and you just use the real estate for a long-term appreciation, equity growth, and then also the depreciation purposes.
I don't think I've ever had anyone mention that aspect of, those smaller multifamily assets, in the sense that I just kind of, I guess, know that by now. But like my wife and I have a duplex that we still have not taken a single dollar from 5 years later. We just let it. It's like a stock account or a savings account. It just keeps growing. And like, we don't need that money. So just like forget about it. And then you check it every now and then. It's like, oh, cool. There's more money in there. But I don't think anyone has actually ever said that in a conversation with me on this podcast of, you're not going to get that cash flow right away, or you probably shouldn't be taking that cash flow right away. So that was very interesting idea or thought that you had there, Jake. So tell me how, I know you've been doing wholesale exclusively for 15 months. What kind of growth have you seen over the last 15 months, and has rising interest rates and any of the market shifts that we've experienced here in the United States, how has that impacted your business?
Yeah, growth in terms of our business itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so growth in terms of our business itself, the few things to touch on this. For one, we started out at the beginning 15 months ago, no team, right? Just me and Isaiah. Then we slowly built up a team. So building up a team is definitely going to increase our growth. But we went from we probably did 4 wholesale deals in college, right? For that 9-month span, like every couple months we do one. The thing I've learned is we just weren't getting nearly enough leads. That's why we were so inconsistent with our deals. But we went from a deal every other month to now consistently doing like 3 to 5 deals a month, right? So, and the main thing I learned, one of the biggest things I learned in 2023 is no leads, no business, right? There's 2 ways that you can generate leads in wholesaling. There's outbound marketing, inbound marketing, right? Outbound marketing is calling and texting. You're reaching out to the homeowner. These leads are going to need way more follow-up because you're reaching out to them. So their timeline could be 10 months, 8 months, 6 months, 4 months, right? So then you need someone to be following up with them until they are ready to sell, right? Because you want to be that one. Whereas if you're paying for marketing, pay per click, which is like Google ads, people going on, hey, I need to sell my house fast and clicking on something, or direct mail, those leads are hotter and aren't going to require as much follow-up, right? Because they're coming to you. They're ready. If I'm on the internet searching, I need to sell my house fast for cash, I'm ready to go. I'm not waiting 9 months. I'm not doing that 9 months in advance. So because we do this outbound marketing, you just need a lot of leads. It's a big sorting process, right? Because you're reaching out to a lot of unmotivated people. So where we really saw the growth of our business is where we went from 1 caller, we just jumped up to 3 cold callers, right? And then we added a full-time texter, right? So now we're getting, instead of 2 leads a day, we're getting 15 to 20 leads a day. And then it's just a sorting process. That's the answer to the first question. That's the kind of growth we've seen. From a revenue perspective, we did, I think, just under 400,000 last year. And our goal is to get up to $1 million this year. So we're going to hire a couple of salespeople and continue that journey. But the journey is not really about the money. It's more about buying our time back, right? The goal isn't really to get to a certain revenue point. The goal is to get out of the business, right? The goal is to automate it, have it give us some cash flow. Interest rates do not affect us directly, but indirectly they do, right? Because what is wholesaling for anyone who doesn't know, right? You're essentially the acquisitions people for fix and flippers, right? Fix and flippers, they don't want to call, they don't want to text, they don't want to do all that stuff. So you would go get a property under contract at say 100,000. Maybe the thing's worth 250, all fixed up, but it needs like 60K of work. I'm going to assign that deal to a fix and flipper, right? The purchase and sale at maybe 110, and I make a $10,000 spread. There's still plenty of room for that fix and flipper to go in, put the renovations, make a spread, and sell the deal, right? So that's essentially wholesaling. We never have to bring any money to the table because we're finding a fix and flipper. What we do have to understand is if the fix and flipper is our buyer, they're our client in a sense. If interest rates are up for them, that means that their hard money in their lending is going to be more expensive. So they're going to have to buy cheaper, right? So things like supply on the market, interest rate, that's all going to play a big factor in where we need to lock our deals up so we know where we can sell them. So we do have to be aware of it. And it does affect us in that way.
Yeah, I was curious because I have a partnership that does flip houses. And, over the last 6 months, 8 months or so, we've looked at a lot of deals. And, with our private money getting more expensive, we've submitted offers that are maybe, 10% under what they're coming to us at, just because our money's more expensive now. And I've seen less deals selling for what they're initially pumped out at, just because I think now people are starting to understand. And some of them we got renegotiated down. They went back to the sellers and we made the deal happen. But we're just not doing as many deals because they're coming out a little too high compared to what our cost is right now for the money and all that stuff. So I was curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think if you have a good wholesale company, you have a good dispositions department. So my partner is phenomenal at that. Like he's been building it out and doing a really good job. But you have different buyers with different appetites, right? Like you have your fix and flipper who does 20 deals a year. They're going to buy a little bit less than the fix and flipper who's doing 2 deals a year, right? So it's about finding the best person at the price. But you don't always want to go after the highest price, right? Sometimes it's about building relationships. So you might give it to someone in the marketplace, not get as much, build the relationship, get it done quick, But it's all about having that. It's like at a restaurant, right? You have the order of every buyer, and based on where you're getting the deal, how much it is, with the size of it, the level of rehab, all those things, it's going to be an item for different buyers, right?
Right. And how another kind of interest rate related question. I know a lot of the time wholesale sellers, like the people you are getting these contracts signed with before you assign them to a buyer in the end, a lot of the time those people have, properties that are maybe dilapidated. They have, they're in a tough financial situation. You have like those standard kind of situations that people might be in that they need to sell the house fast. Have any of those situations changed, or has interest rates going up maybe caused someone to reach out to you and say, hey, I need to sell my house? Has there been any impact with this rising interest rate market that has maybe, encouraged more people to reach out to you, or less?
Yeah, it's definitely, again, I think it affects kind of the back end supply and demand, because it is important for us to watch overall supply, right? Because again, it affects the fix and flippers and it affects what we can sell the deal at. Like you said, these sellers are sellers that are in distress, right? It's the 6 to 10% of every market that is in distress, right? So regardless of interest rates are up or down, the market's up or down, these people need to sell, right? You're going through a divorce, you need to sell the house. You're not paying your mortgage payments, it doesn't matter what interest rates are, you got to sell the house, right? So things like that. And those are the people we're mainly doing deals with, right? But that's how we're able to get properties at the price we are, right? Because we're providing other value. They're basically saying, hey, I'll sell to you this price. I know I could get more, but if you can solve these problems over here, right? Help me get the tenant out, get me the money quick, help me move my stuff to Texas. I'll sell it at this price. I don't care, right? So they always have other problems going on. Otherwise, they would just list it, right? There's no reason they would sell it at a discount. But no, those people, generally interest rates aren't affected. I'd say there are some borderline people that we do deals with that aren't really distressed, but they have some level of motivation. But you don't see it a ton, no.
Yep. The other thing I was going to ask you is I'm not very familiar with New Hampshire tenant laws. So Oregon landlord tenant laws, especially in Portland Metro, very strict, very tenant favored. I've talked about it plenty of times on this podcast. It's a I guess touch point for us in the industry. What are those laws like? And if you do have a situation where, a landlord needs to sell a property that's tenant occupied, what's that process look like to get someone out? Is it fairly easy? Is it complicated? How does that play into your guys' business?
Yeah, New Hampshire is I think the most landlord friendly state in New England, right? New England's Maine, Mass, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, right? That Northeast. Most landlord friendly. So typically it's about like a 30-day process, I think, to get them out. Not bad at all. Like we stay out of Massachusetts because Massachusetts is a nightmare. Like you'll be in there evicting someone for like 6 or 7 months. And they make a joke, yeah, the property is owned by the bank, then the tenant, then the landlord. You know what I mean? So it's impossible to do anything. But yeah, I mean, with the multifamily sellers, it's always the most important question is like, what are the lease terms, right? For one, are they yearly? Are they month to month? And then obviously you're trying to do, obviously, as you know, with strict landlord laws, you're probably doing cash for keys, right? Where you're trying to do other methods to get them out if possible, where you don't have to take it to that stage. But yeah, it's a 30-day process. It's not too bad. But yeah, ideally, you don't have to do that.
I had to ask you that because as a wholesaler, I've definitely seen those types of deals come across. I'm not a wholesaler, but I've seen those deals come across my desk. And like, I literally looked at one that was 2 minutes from my house, but had a tenant in it. Didn't really want to deal with waiting 4 months to get them out. And so I passed on it. So I was more so curious about that rather than anything else.
Well, yeah. So that's interesting. I was thinking about it as a buyer, but as a wholesaler, yeah. So your buyer has to be okay with it, and they're going to want X amount of discount, more of a discount because they have to deal with the tenant. So if we're looking at the deal and we're like, this is a nightmare with this tenant right now, we're going to have to get it at X amount less just for that reason, because they're going to have to deal with this for 3 to 4 months, right?
Well, and I was the buyer in this situation, and I think we wrote an offer like 30 grand under, 40 grand under what it was in our inbox at. And, we didn't get it, but someone else is willing to deal with those headaches. And to me, it was going to be worth about $40,000.
Yeah. At a certain point, you just cut your losses. You pick and choose your battles. Like, do I really want to deal with that? It's like not even worth it.
Exactly. So another question I have is, when it comes to wholesaling multifamily, have you ever done any multifamily wholesale, or is that something you stay away from?
No, yeah, we do it. Funny you should ask. That's the deal we're going to go over, is a multifamily wholesale. But yeah, it's dude, we almost had a killer with a commercial property. The thing that's good about multifamily wholesaling is because the price points are higher, you just have a bigger assignment fee, right?
Yeah.
Because on average, wholesalers make about 10% of the purchase price, right? So if it's like a $400,000 ARV, the wholesaler might make $40K, right? $300,000, you make $30K. That's probably on the high end, but roughly speaking, right? So if the property is worth $1 million, you could make like $100K assignment, if you're getting at a deep enough discount. So just because the values are higher on multifamilies, usually you'll get a bigger spread, because 5% of $1 million is more than 5% of 500,000, So yeah, definitely pretty much the same concept. You just got to get some different information. Obviously, multifamilies, the main things you're going to want to be getting is the rent roll, right? Getting all the rent rolls and the lease terms, making sure you know what the bedroom count of each unit is. Parking is a big thing. How many off-street parking spaces are there per unit? Is it on city water and sewer is a massive thing, as you'll see in this deal deep dive. Because if you don't even have to deal with that, that's probably one of the most expensive things you can replace is the septic or the well if it's messed up, especially for a big building. So if you're on city water and sewer, and some buyers won't even buy with their own septic and well, right? They just want on city. You're in the clear there. So those are some of the main things you want to get. And then utilities, right? Are they separately metered? Who handles the utilities? Things like that. So other than that, you're just getting basic information. It's still a conversation. It's still a sales process. It's still a numbers game. You're just looking at the numbers, and you still have buyers. It's the same deal. You just get some different information, and it depends on the avatar of the person you're speaking with, right? Because a lot of times it's a higher level investor, so you have to understand how to navigate that conversation. It's not Sally Joe selling her inherited single family down the road,
Right. Absolutely. Well, the reason I asked that question is because I wanted to go into the 12-unit property deal that we're going to talk about today and dive into a little bit. So give me a little background on this 12-unit property that we're going to go into.
Yeah. So this was a deal. First talked to the lead before we went full time. So I was still doing the realtor thing. I was bar backing, all these things. And this is a classic older seller, right? He's 80 something, only has a flip phone, classic driver personality, just like one sentence. He's like, this is what I want. Like, can't have a conversation with him. The first conversation I had with him was about like a single family he had.
And now, here's a word from our sponsor.
Get things done while you're on the move. Learn more about working with a virtual assistant through Offsite Professionals. It's a great way to get all the things done that you need to get done. Have freedom in your time and streamline your life by automating your business. Stop spending time on the tasks that you can delegate and start spending more time on your superpower. Call us today at 503-446-3177 or visit our website at offsiteprofessionals.com.
Uptown Syndication is now offering a syndication coaching program for you to take your real estate portfolio to the next level. This is your opportunity to have experienced syndicators, AJ and Chris Shepard, coach you on your way to controlling your real estate investing future. Our coaching program will provide you with the tools and framework needed to begin syndicating real estate in your target market. Go to uptownsyndication.com today to learn more.
The numbers didn't make sense. He was asking way too much. I was like, oh, this guy sucks. Like, you know what I mean? It just won't talk to me. He's being a jerk, all these things. But then I asked one of the best questions you can always ask is, hey, do you have any other properties you would consider selling? Well, I got a 12 unit. Like, okay, 12 unit. What are you looking to get for? He's like, 900,000. 900,000? Yeah, 900,000. Da da da. And then he ghosted me for like 3 months, dude. 3 months. I could not get in touch with this guy. I was like, no way. Like, this is. And I was talking to my partner. I was like, dude, I think he said 900,000. I don't know. Like, that seems like a really way too low, but I think he said that. So we just started following up. And he finally got back to me and said, yep, 900,000. That's what I want. Like, very, very short. Like, these conversations were like maybe 1-2 minutes, just getting the basic information. Like, dude, he didn't even have his rent rolls or anything written down. Like, he wrote them on a piece of paper, and I had to drive out to his place, get them like written down, like chicken scratch. And I gave him the agreement like in person, in hand. We do everything virtually now. Like, we don't drive anywhere. But that's kind of how it started. And that was the beginning of how we got it under contract.
So before I ask more questions about this, kind of just a curiosity question again here. If he told you 900,000, would there ever be a point in time where you would go maybe put out some feelers to potential buyers and say, hey, I might have a deal at, $1 million or whatever you're going to put it out at, and see if you could maybe procure a buyer for that prior to even getting it under an assignment contract?
Yeah, you 100% can. That's what we do all the time. It's like reverse wholesaling, right? Go see what the buyer's at before you lock it up. If you don't know, we were very familiar with this market and do it very well. So we knew that was a deal, hands down. So we didn't even need to check. So we are just like, let's just lock this thing up as quickly as we can.
Okay. So 900K was what the seller wanted. What was the unit mix on this property?
Dude, it was a nice building. So it's built in New England. You have really old buildings. Like you're coming across a lot of buildings that are built in like 1800s, like low 1900s, like 1900 and 1910. You see a ton of multifamilies in that range. This was built in 2000. This guy had built it. It was an 8 unit, right? So it was 8 units in one building side by side with a garage underneath. All the systems were good. All the cosmetics were good. New roof, everything. Like, it was a little bit dated cosmetically. And then there was 2 duplexes on the same street. It was like its own street. So it was an 8 unit, two duplexes, all the same style, right? Unit up top, 2 floors with a garage underneath, and it was all in really good shape. But yeah, it was a really nice building. Honestly, like, looking back, if we should have just like held it.
What was how many bedrooms and baths were in these units?
All 2 bedroom, 1 bath. Yeah.
I mean, just doing some rough calculations, I feel like that's a hell of a deal. Just what I'm gathering right now.
100%. I mean, I think we calculated like it. Yeah. I forget what we calculated for the end value fixed up, because he had to put a decent amount of work into it, because it didn't need a lot of work, but just a big building, so you're already spending like 100K, 200K just to do whatever you needed to do. But yeah, it was definitely a good discount.
So I'm assuming that there was something other than the cosmetic updates that were required. There had to have been something that was driving this price down. Maybe, were rents below market? Were utilities were utilities included in the rent not being billed back? What were those details like that would only cost?
Oh yeah, it was way under rent, like half or something. You know what I mean? They were on weekly rents. They were paying weekly, not even monthly. People are in there paying weekly, so it was like $200 a week. They were all in there at like $700-800, all the rents. Like, those could be easily $1,500. You know what I mean? $1,400-1,500. So yeah, it was about half rented.
Okay.
In terms of its
So obviously the financing aspect is kind of a moot point here because you're going to assign this contract to an end buyer. What was the next steps? You got it under contract. Seller wants 900. Where do you go from there?
Interesting point though. When you get into these commercial deals, these banks, and we just kind of learned to work around to this, banks will not pay out assignment fees like these big commercial lending institutions. Because how does a wholesale deal typically work, right? It's a cash deal. It's coming from an asset-based lender who's familiar with wholesaling. They'll pay out an assignment fee. This guy was using financing for this because it was like $1 million price point, right? He's using his lender. So they wouldn't allow a wholesale. So we had to double close on this. So that means that we got transactional. We actually did a double escrow on this, not to get complicated, but a double close is essentially we have the buyer locked in. We're going to go get transactional funding. Hey, they'll give us $900,000 the day of, right? And then the buyer is going to pay the lender back, right? So actually close on it and then resell it within like an hour. So, but we didn't do that. We did a double escrow where our title company actually allowed us to have the two purchase and sale. So we essentially had a P&S with the seller and then a P&S with the buyer, and they were identical. And then we put them to title, and then title allowed the seller to come in first and then the buyer to come in, and she just allowed the funds to flow through from the buyer to the seller. And we actually didn't have to close on it, which was great. But you still have to pay double transfer tax, which killed us. We had to pay like 20 grand and like out of our assignment fee for taxes, bro. I was like, this is crazy. But anyways, that was the financing.
So whenever I've done wholesale deals, typically, I guess I should say, depending on the title company, they'll allow an assignment fee. Was this just because of the financing that the buyer was using?
Yeah, it was the lender that wasn't doing it because the lender was going to see the HUD and they were not going to allow the assignment fee to be paid out because it was the bank, you know? It was like an actual bank. It wasn't like a hard money lender, you know? It wasn't the title company, yeah.
I was thinking of like a private lender. I was like, doesn't sound normal.
Yeah.
So now you close on the deal. Buyer has it. You do your double escrow. It's off your guys' books. Seller gets his $900K. Do you know what the buyer ended up doing with it, or are you just done after that point?
Okay, so we'll back up. So this is one of our first. I mean, this is probably our 6th or 7th deal ever. Biggest deal we done for sure. So we had it at 900, right? We initially had this buyer locked in at $1,025,000, which is a $125,000 assignment fee. And one thing we learned on this was that, so he did a septic inspection, just classic buyer beating you up, but he did a septic inspection and a well inspection. Septic came back good, but I guess there was something wrong with the well, right? Like some filters weren't changed, right? And what sucked is he was like, this is what could happen, right? Worst case scenario, this is what could happen. So I have to factor this in. The odds of this happening are probably 5%, right? 95% chance it's only going to be like, say, a 10K repair, but it could be a 35K repair. So I have to factor that in. I have to account for 35K. So he hit us with like I think like a $25,000 reduction on that assignment. So it went from 125 to 100, right? And then I think the taxes were like 15 because we ended up netting like 84 on the assignment. But our lesson was just like, present all the information to the buyer up front. Because I guarantee if we would have presented to him like a report on the well and these things, he would have seen that it's only whatever, $5,000, $10,000 renovation. And he would have made that decision up front. Like, yeah, I'm willing to accept the price at $1,025,000 with all this stuff. So when you're wholesaling, if you can present as much information to the buyer when you're selling the deal so that there's nothing they can come back on you and be like, well, I didn't know about this. I need a reduction. You know what I mean? So that was like the big lesson on that one.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up because now that I'm thinking about the wholesale deals that I've seen, most of the time, if there's roof or foundation or whatever, they already have, or septic well, all those different items, they already have reports attached in the marketing that we get. So is that something that you guys do all the time now going forward?
Oh yeah, all the time. Anything wrong with it, we're putting it out right up front, right? Because I mean, I would do the same thing though. I can't fault them. I mean, like if I get a deal and you tell me that it's this, and then I go in there and it needs a new roof. You didn't tell me about that. There's 15K off of it. You know what I mean? Because it's an easy thing to justify as a buyer. But if you give them all the information, there's no grounds for them to reduce.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the time wholesale deals, you have maybe 1 or 2 inspection days. You're not just, walking people through these properties all the time. And so attaching these reports, you're able to say, hey, I'm going to be here or it's going to be open this one day. You can come take a look around, but you already have all the inspection information ahead of time.
Yeah, so it would be, we wouldn't do inspections a lot. It's kind of interesting by market. Like in Florida, like this one property had a septic, the buyer didn't even care, but in New Hampshire, they care. So I don't know. It really depends on the location. But yeah, you would typically only do a couple showings, right? 'Cause that's part of the benefit to the seller. This isn't a listing where it's like, yeah, 15 showings, right? You try to just have it be 1 or 2, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
if you have these inspections and this information beforehand, like I've bought houses sight unseen, even though they're 15 minutes down the road. But if I have all this inspection information already, I don't feel like I need to rearrange my schedule to go look at it if I can see the pictures and the inspections, right?
Well, yeah, it's also just good business practice, just a good business practice. Like if I can give you all the information, all the inspections, you don't have to go do a bunch of stuff, right? Like you just want to work with us more often. Oh, great. Jake's going to give me the inspection report and everything that's wrong with it, and he never lies about it. Great. Let's do more deals with them.
I also had a question about the transfer tax. So you and your business had to pay transfer tax, even though, is that because you were, I guess,
because of the double close.
So, but the buyer has to pay transfer tax and the seller? I thought just the sellers had to pay transfer tax.
Yeah, because we were selling it. Because you know what I mean? Because we closed on it. So we had A, B, and C. Seller was A, we were the B party. The buyer was the C party. Because it was a double close, we closed on it A to B with the seller, right? That seller paid transfer taxes. Now we were selling it to the end buyer. So we were the seller in that scenario. So we had to pay the transfer tax. So I guess it wasn't double transfer tax, but it was just the transfer tax.
Right. Okay. I was like, you paid the seller's transfer tax when you became the buyer before selling it to the end buyer. That's what I was confused about.
I think we might have messed up too. And this is what it was. Because we promised the seller we'd pay all the closing costs. So on the first one, we did have to pay all of them. Because, like with single family, that's like one of the things. Yeah, we cover all the closing costs, no commissions. But now with these multifamilies, it's never an expectation really that the buyer would pay your closing costs. So now we never say that. We really harp on the benefits of, hey, you're saving the realtor commission. You know what I mean? 5% off $1 million is a decent amount. Minimal tenant disturbance. We'll make it easy for you. Things like that versus trying to pay the closing costs because it's expensive at that price range,
Yeah. So you guys made 84 grand on this deal. What else did you take away? Was there anything else that you learned from? Obviously, it was an early deal in your guys' career and your business, so I'm sure there's other things. But can you think of anything else you learned from it?
Yeah, it's a lot of things. One thing, the whole septic, right? Presenting the information to the buyers, learning that that was the first time because those are like big buyers in there. Those are like big boys. You know what I mean? Like they weren't messing around. They weren't some fix and flipper. This guy had like freaking hundreds of units. He's in there bidding on this property. Like he's been in the business for forever. Like he's not messing around. We're just two kids. You know what I mean? So when you get to that level, it's a lot more hardball and they're going to try to get the best deal possible. Obviously. I mean, it's just, it's business, So kind of playing at that level was definitely a good learning experience. I think acquiring the deal, just doing whatever it takes to acquire the deal. And I remember getting under contract was actually a struggle because he almost backed out of it because he wanted it to close in like 30 days, which is just like impossible. It was a 12-unit building and the guy was getting financing. So no way it was going to close in 30 days. We got under contract in like November 28th and he wanted to close before the end of the year. Like, dude, it's just not possible. We can't do that, but we'll do it as quickly as we can. So it's just a roller coaster. And then he finally signed it. And then we thought we were making 125 and I was like, oh my God, this is insane. Then we get knocked down. And then we had to pay all the transfer taxes. And I was like, oh. But overall, it was great. Follow up. That's the other thing too, right? He ghosted me for 3 months. Didn't respond to me. Got to keep hitting it, following up. And he eventually answered. And because you never know, like this guy just wasn't on his phone. He has a flip phone, doesn't text, right? Doesn't have internet. He's like 85. So you just got to keep it pushing,
Absolutely. So I guess I'll go back to my end buyer question. When you do a wholesale deal, are you guys, especially on the fix and flip or even this one for a matter of fact, are you like looking at the listings that come up and be like, oh, they did this with this house, or do you not even care?
Yeah, no, the level of renovation definitely plays a factor because when we're like kind of estimating our rehabs, we're not like itemizing. We just use like a chart, just like general estimations. But if something is like super upgraded, like highest quality renovations and it's commanding a certain ARV, we have to understand that like, okay, normal rehab isn't going to get this done. They'd have to go all out to try to command this ARV. So we are looking at the different things, not in the sense of like, yeah, that's the main reason we look at it, just to understand what this buyer is going to have to do to get that value, right? So it might be more or less renovations, And a good thing to understand too is if it's a rental, you're not going to have to put as much work into it, right? Because they're only trying to get it rent ready. They're not going to deck it out, and that would be stupid anyways if you're going to have a tenant go in there, right? So you can run your renovations a little bit lighter when it's a rental, right? Maybe it's a duplex or a triplex. You're running your numbers a little bit different. Instead of ARV times 75% minus repairs minus wholesale fee for a fix and flipper, you can do maybe ARV times 80%, right? Because if they can be all in for 80, they got 20% equity. That's phenomenal, right? Minus the repairs, which aren't going to be as much as a fix and flipper because they're just getting it rent ready, would be your buy number. So that's how you come up with different buy numbers, right? Because your fix and flipper is going to need it lower than a buy and hold investor for that reason, right? Because they're short-term gain. They need to factor in that price. But yeah.
How long did it take you guys to get comfortable with that side of, the analyzing of a deal or analysis of a deal? That comes with experience, I feel like, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just reps, just doing it a bunch of times, for the past 2.5 years, just running comps every single day on deals. You get comfortable with it for sure. And I realized too, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you ever, after you've assigned a deal, do you ever go back and look at those deals and how they turned out and seeing what the ARVs actually were to compare your numbers? Yeah,
something we've done lately. It's actually super important because it's going to give you an indicator of, because some markets I might be able to lock it up 82% ARV. Some markets I might need to be 75% ARV depending. Like we just had a deal today we sold in Exeter, New Hampshire. We got it under contract for $380 or $374 or something. We made like 35K on it, right? And then the flipper had an ARV of 550. Thing sold for 600. Now he did a really good job on it, but we were just looking at it. Sold for 600. He was all in for 500 and 5,000. Made like 100K, or I guess minus the closing costs. Probably made like 70K. So my partner who does dispositions was on the phone with him today, like talking to him, like, hey, what's going on? Like, just curious, what were your numbers? He was giving it to us. But you love to see that though. Like you like to see the flipper also just like crush it, because then it's just a great win-win.
Well, and if I'm sure you have the information somewhere, but do you remember when you initially sent that deal out, what your projected ARV was?
Like 550.
That was
540, 550.
ARV.
And his, both of ours. We didn't know. We had the same ARV. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought he came up with that, but I was curious if you compared it to yours.
What's crazy is like we thought it was 550. Things sold for 6. It's wild.
That's a great deal for everybody. Like you said, win-win.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm sure the seller won in that situation too. So it was a win-win.
Oh yeah. Yep. Absolutely. That's an important thing is the win-win-win model, right? You want to be a win for the seller, win for us, win for the buyer. If you can do that on every single deal, you're going to stay in business for a long time and build a great reputation, right? So the seller on that deal actually, she got into a divorce, I think. And, she was just looking to start over. House needed work. It needed work and she couldn't do it. And it was too big for her and all these things. And she just wanted to cash out so she could pay for her kids' college and just rent somewhere. She didn't want to be a homeowner anymore. So she just gave us a number. I was like, great, move forward, got it done quickly. But yeah.
See,
dude, that deal was crazy, actually. That deal was wild. I was in Italy. So I was in Italy for the summer. Digression real quick, but I was in Italy for 2 weeks, went on vacation. My mom got in a moped accident. So we had to stay for like 4 more months. She's okay. But so I'm there like on my laptop, like wholesaling in Sorrento, Italy. And this deal, dude, because it was a time change, they're 6 hours ahead. So for 3 or 4 nights in a row, I had to stay up till like 2 a.m. because the seller kept saying, yeah, I'll call you at 6 p.m., which is midnight there, right? But then it ended up being like they couldn't talk till 7 p.m. Eastern time. So I had to stay up till like 1 a.m. every night to try to get this deal signed. And by the end of it, I was like, F this. I don't even want to deal with this property anymore. But then, because they kept saying they were going to sign the deal and all this stuff. And there was like an ex-husband who wasn't involved. He wanted all these, or he was involved like with the sale because of the divorce decree. And he wanted all these changes to the agreement and this and that. I was like, this thing is never going to get signed right now. And I've been staying up to like 2 a.m. every night for like 4 nights in a row. But then it ended up getting signed and we made money. So like, but that was a crazy story too.
It worked out in the end. Wholesalers are
Yeah.
good people. Sometimes wholesalers get a bad rap, but wholesalers, if everyone's winning, wholesalers are great. They help the investors, they help the sellers, and they help themselves, which is how business should be done.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, man. It's like, it's tough because there's no barrier to entry. There's definitely a lot of bad apples out there, but it's like there's bad apples with anything. Police officers, realtors, right? There's all bad apples, which gives everyone a bad name. But if you can just be a good person, you know what I mean? If you can just be a good person and do good business, like you're in a good position, you know?
Exactly. Well, Jake, did you want to talk about anything else today that I may have missed?
No, this has been phenomenal.
All right, man. Well, where can people connect with you if you want to share more or they want to learn more from you?
Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Jake_Burhans. I have a free wholesaling community. It's a Facebook group. I do live calls or live Zooms every Wednesday where we do sales training, role play, answer any questions you have. In that community, I have a 5,000 record skip trace list that you can just go start calling. I have scripts in there. I have everything you need to get started and the community to support you. So if you want to get into wholesaling, there's no excuses not to because it's all free.
Hell yeah. We'll make sure those links are in the description. Jake, thanks so much for coming on and sharing about your career, your businesses, as well as the 12 unit and the single family when you were in Italy. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing today.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Jake.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Real Estate Professionals Investing Podcast on Win, your community of investing knowledge for growth. We hope that this episode has increased your knowledge and added value to your path to freedom. If you would, please take a second to rate us so that we can get more great investors to interview. If you or someone that you know wants to be on, please visit westsideinvestors.com and fill out our form to be on the show. Thank you again and enjoy your day.